I'm Jeff Pospisil, the 10-Minute Treasurer with practical advice for improving your church's financial future. In this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the duties of the Staff Pastor Relations Committee, and that is to set personnel policies. And I'm going to encourage you, if you think, well, we're just a small church, does this really apply to you? I'm going to encourage you to at least make some policy decisions. The reason I want all churches to consider some personnel policies is because of this quote: when there's a person, there's a problem. You know, being a Christian doesn't get rid of that truth. When there's a person, there's a problem. The quote goes on that when there's no person, there's no problem. Well, that's not even true. Back in the early days of Christianity, you know, we had these monks, these desert fathers that went out and lived all by themselves in the middle of the desert. And guess what? They still found out when even it was just them, there was still a problem. So there was one person, one, and probably a multitude of problems. But actually, the person that said this was Joseph Stalin. And so his idea was to get rid of the problems. So probably not a solution for a church. So don't kid yourself to think that by adopting policies, you'll be eliminating problems, because as long as you have people, you're going to have problems. But by giving attention to these two specific areas, you can really greatly reduce the number of employee problems at least. And so just some of the inspiration for this was my family. We just recently purchased the Game of Life with pets. So we've played the regular Game of Life, you know, hundreds of times. And so we purchased this new version, and we just started playing without reading the instructions because we assumed we knew all the rules, you know. And after much arguing, and I can't remember if somebody quit the game or not, but anyway, we decided we better read the instructions. And now it's been much more enjoyable because of these two things. We knew how to win. So, and for your church needs to know what a win looks like for the church in general, but then also each position needs to know what does it look like for them to win, for the pastor to win, the secretary to win, the youth pastor, whoever it is. What does it look like for them to win? And then also we have a common set of rules. Here's how we conduct business. You know, this is what is the expectation for how things will get done. So those are the two areas you need to look at, and I'll talk about them a little bit more fully. So when we're defining winning, one of the things that matters is the title for a position. It just plays a part in your identity when you're in that position, and then how you interact with others. So just for example, you know, a church secretary versus an assistant to the senior pastor. It gives you a different idea of what winning might be. You know, church secretary getting out the bulletin in time, you know, answering phone calls, that kind of thing. Assistant to the senior pastor, if the senior pastor wins, you win. So that's the kind of thing. Associate pastor versus youth and worship pastor. It just gives you a little bit clearer view of what winning would be. I'm going to steal some terminology from Dave Ramsey. He likes to talk about how every position should have a key results area. And what this means is that it's a document that identifies the most important areas of a position and what it looks like to win in those areas. And every employee should get a copy of this before they even start. And the reason this is important is that probably your church leaders, you as the Staff Pastor Relations Committee, you have an idea of what it looks like to win at your church for the pastor. But your pastor is going to come in there and they're going to have a different idea of what it looks like to win. And initially, you should put your expectations first. And then as you guys learn the different strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and whatnot, then you could probably refine that to better fit your pastor. But at least putting that first round, because if this is what your key results area looks like, you know, visiting the elderly and the new people, being a community leader, and then preaching 48 Sundays a year. But if your pastor thinks that preaching is by far number one, and then teaching Bible studies is number two, and whatever else, you're going to think they're failing, and your pastor's not going to know why that is. And every position really does need a key results area. Every position needs to know what it looks like to win in their position for the church. So secretary, custodian, youth, children's ministry, all these ones do. So for a secretary, it might be this: greeting callers and visitors with a smile, attractive worship slides, managing the calendars. That's what a win looks like. So setting good titles for the positions, and then these key results areas, that will help them know how to win in their position and how to win for the church. Now we're going to shift to setting rules. And specifically, I'm going to focus on those rules that I get calls about, because if I get calls about it, you probably need a policy, and then I'll get less calls maybe. The first one is time off. I get calls about how much time does a pastor get for vacation, sick leave, personal leave. And there are minimums set in the conference journal, and I'll put a link to the conference journal in the description. But setting that, adopting that for your own church, for your pastor as well as any lay employees, what time off is it paid time off? How much do you get? So that'd be a good thing to think of through. The other thing is accountable reimbursements. I get this quite often. What are normal things to be reimbursed for? How often do we get reimbursed for it? If the pastor leaves or the employee leaves, what if it's a laptop we bought they've used through accountable reimbursements? What do we do with that? It's technically the church's property, so is there a way that the pastor can purchase it, or what? So thinking through those kind of things for accountable reimbursements. Compensation and benefits. A lot of the compensation and benefits is set by the conference, at least the minimum is set. More important, focus on what it is for the lay employees, but also it doesn't hurt to actually describe it out. So your pastor gets paid this minimum, which is called equitable compensation or minimum comp. And then they also get a pension plan and a health plan and a disability. So those are the things that you could even list in there, even if you're just repeating what the conference policy is. Because I do get quite a bit of questions that it's not bad for your staff pastor relations committee to be aware of their entire compensation and benefits for your pastor. So those are all the regular calls that I get, but I also get calls that I transfer to the district superintendent or DS. And so normally I'll listen to them, and then once I feel like they're not something I want to deal with, I'll pass you or on to the district superintendent. And so these ones normally are discipline issues. So what is the process if there's a discipline issue with the secretary or the pastor or some other position what is the path to going towards resolving that issue? The other one is harassment. And this is really one for legal and insurance reasons too, where it's wise to say, okay, if you feel like or know that you've been harassed, sexually harassed or any other kind of harassment, where do you go? So that's something that's good to define as well. And then the one that I think will become more important, I don't get that many calls about it, but as we have more and more part-time pastors, I think we're going to have more outside employment issues. And so, okay, do we need approval for that? Would you be upset if your pastor was also serving at the bar? Would that be an issue? So what kind of approval do we need for outside employment? All right. Hopefully this has been helpful. And if it was, like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. And again, this is a ministry of the Dakotas Conference of the United Methodist Church, as well as the Dakotas United Methodist Foundation. And be blessed.